Let us see what is our system of elections, the Indian system of elections. Okay, so this is the system of elections and I'm going to briefly tell you what is the system. So we have the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha. So these are the houses in the parliament and the state legislative assembly. So Lok Sabha is one of the house of the parliament, Vidhan Sabha is one of the house of the state legislative assembly. Okay, so these elections are held regularly after every, in an interval between 5 years. At an interval of 5 years, their elections are held. After 5 years, the term of all the elected representatives comes to an end. The Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha, they dissolve. Elections are held in all constituencies at the same time, either on the same day or within a few days. This is called a general election. So a general election is what you and me vote for. Sometimes election is held only for one constituency to fill the vacancy caused by death or a resignation of a member. This is called a by-election. So basically a by-election is held when there's a death of a member or that person has resigned. So to fill in that the vacancy for that constituency, a by-election is taken place. So let us see the two kinds of constituencies now, electoral constituencies and the reserved constituencies. In India, we follow an area-based system of representation. A particular area is being represented by a certain person who further represents himself at the parliament, at the Lok Sabha. Okay, so the country is divided into different areas for purposes of elections, which are called electoral constituencies. The voters who live in an area elect one representative. So I will be briefly telling you the kind of Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha election, the state assembly election, that is the Vidhan Sabha elections. So first let's see the Lok Sabha election. In the Lok Sabha election, the country is divided into 543 constituencies, 503 from different areas. Okay, the representative elected from each one of the constituency is called a member of parliament, and he represents himself at the Lok Sabha. Okay, one of the features of a democratic election is that every vote should have one equal value. Okay, so our constitution requires that each constituency should have a roughly equal population living with it. So for the MPs, for the members of parliament that are being represented at the Lok Sabha election, is where the universal adult franchisee comes into picture. Then let's get into the Vidhan Sabha or the state assembly election. So in this, each state is further divided into different constituencies. Just like 543 constituencies for the entire country, the separate constituencies, different constituencies are formed for the state. The elected representative from each constituency is called the MLA, that is Member of Legislative Assembly. Then each parliamentary constituency has within it several assembly constituencies. So we have the parliamentary constituency and then the assembly constituencies. It's the same kind of area demarcation that has happened in Lok Sabha election is happening just in the state. It's being replicated in the state. Further, the same principle applies for Panchayat and municipal elections. That is, complete local representation in the Panchayat and municipal areas of our districts. The same kind of election process is taking place. Let's see how that happens. So each village or town is divided into several wards. Just like constituency, it's called wards here. Each ward elects one member of the village or the urban local body. The candidate contests for one seat from one of the wards. Just like how one candidate goes from one constituency, it's one candidate for one ward. Let's take a note of something here. Sometimes these constituencies are counted as seats. For each constituency represents one seat in the assembly. So let's take an example of that. When we say Lokdal, a party called Lokdal won 60 seats in Haryana, it means that candidates of Lokdal won in 60 assembly constituencies in the state as a whole, and thus Lokdal had 60 MLAs forming the state assembly. Let's see another example here. This is a map of Kottayam in Kerala. So it's the Kottayam Lok Sabha constituency and it includes various districts. So here we can see the ones that are mentioned in red here are the different assembly constituencies, and the ones in the small black lettered spaces are the different districts that I have. Okay. So it says the numbers in red indicate the number of assembly constituencies representing the state in the Lok Sabha. So the constituencies, the assembly constituencies are ones in red. So people who are elected from here are the ones who finally get into the Lok Sabha as an MP. Let us see the other kind of a constituency, that is reserved constituencies. Okay, so this entire concept of a reserved constituency, it makes the entire process of democracy, the entire concept of a democracy very representative. Let us see how. Okay, so the constitution makers were initially very worried that the weaker sections would lose out on an opportunity to win the MP or MLA elections, due to lack of resources. Lack of resources, let's see what kind of resources were they lacking, the weaker sections, like they were lacking education and monetary power. So due to this, the constitution makers, whoever made the constitution, were wondering, due to the lack of resources, they won't get an opportunity to represent the people. Hence, they came up with a system of reserved constituencies. And the weaker sections that are being mentioned here are like the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, and the OBCs. Okay, so in order to give these weaker sections a voice, a representation to represent other weaker sections in the entire country, they gave reserved constituencies for them. Let us see what it is. Some constituencies are reserved for people who belong to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. In a scheduled reserved constituency, only someone who belongs to scheduled castes can stand for elections. Okay, and not a person who belongs to a general caste. Only a person who belongs to a scheduled caste should contest an election from there. And the same principle applies for scheduled tribe. As of 2019, in the Lok Sabha, 84 seats are reserved for scheduled caste and 47 seats are reserved for scheduled tribes. This is an important pointer I will be telling you. In the Rajya Sabha, which is the other upper house in the parliament, there is no concept of reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. So it is just in the Lok Sabha. So this number is in proportion to their share in the total population. Whatever share is of scheduled caste and scheduled tribe is there in the entire country has been implicated as a form of reservation for them in the parliament. Thus, the reserved seats for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe do not take away the legitimate share of any other social group. They get to represent their section of people and give them a voice. This system of reservation was extended later to the weaker sections at the district and the local level. In many states, seats in rural areas, Panchayat, and urban areas like municipalities and corporations, local bodies are now reserved for other backward classes as well. There is reservation for OBCs as well. However, the proportion of seats reserved varies from state to state. It is not common for all the states. A certain state will have more reserved constituencies and another state will have a lesser number. Similarly, 1/3 of seats are reserved in rural and urban local bodies for women candidates. This is a compulsion that has to be implicated in every state, and not like how the OBC reservation is, which varies from state to state. Every state has to give 1/3 reservation for women candidates in their rural and urban local bodies. So in this picture, in this map, the shaded portion, the light green one, the light green shaded portion is the constituencies that are reserved for the scheduled tribes, and the dark green is for the scheduled caste, and the white is for the general elections, that is.